Over the weekend, mediocre 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick sat during the national anthem. Why? Because he says he won't honor the American flag while it stands for institutional racism. He said, "I'm not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color," said the man with a 78.5 quarterback rating in 2015 and an average annual salary of $19 million. He said, quote, "To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." And then he continued, "I am not looking for approval. I have to stand up for people that are oppressed." Let's leave aside the obvious hypocrisy of this BS. Kaepernick is one of the most privileged people in America. Let's leave aside the fact Kaepernick was adopted and raised by a white family. Let's leave aside the fact that Kaepernick began styling himself a civil rights hero right about the time he started absolutely sucking at his job, and that he was fined for yelling the N-word at another player in 2014. Leave aside the lies undergirding his perspective. America happens to be the best place on earth for people of color to live, including black folks, and the notion that cops are broadly targeting black men for death is statistically false. Let's focus instead on the NFL and the media. The left media have been paying continuous homage to Kaepernick's courage, which is amazing considering, if you recall, how they ripped former NFL quarterback Tim Tebow up and down for the crucial sin of praying before games. They say it's a wonderful exercise of First Amendment freedoms, and that anyone who criticizes Colin Kaepernick doesn't understand the First Amendment, which, of course, demonstrates absolute ignorance of the First Amendment, because no one argues Kaepernick isn't free to say what he wants. We just argue that what he's saying is disgusting and stupid. But he'll be dubbed a civil rights figure just for saying things while pulling down one of America's biggest paychecks. Meanwhile, the NFL itself has stood for St. Louis Rams running out on the field in the hands up, don't shoot pose, you remember that was false, while refusing the Dallas Cowboys' request to pay homage to slain cops. The NFL, much like the rest of the sports world, has now been hijacked by the left. And so we'll see ESPN cover Kaepernick like a hero for taking action that demeans our veterans and our country. And we'll see the NFL pretend that Kaepernick is taking a real stand, as opposed to the kind of stand that earns him plaudits from pundits and quiet pats on the head from the NFL hierarchy. Perhaps the best response to Kaepernick's routine actually came via a Gold Star mom. She wrote, quote, "Mr. Kaepernick, I'm sitting in my living room looking outside at my American flag flying at half staff. You see, my son's body lay in a street after an IED blew up the vehicle he was fighting in. His blood stains the sands of Afghanistan. He died protecting the ideals of the flag you refuse to respect. He died so that ungrateful, privileged, arrogant men like you can be just that, ungrateful, privileged, and arrogant. Shame on you for disrespecting my son and his life and his sacrifice." By the way, if you want to give to Gold Star Children, go to Freedom Alliance, and you can donate in honor of true heroes, rather than the false sports heroes the media and the NFL promote to prominence in their place. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. So first of all, welcome to our brand new sponsor, Birch Gold. So, in times of economic uncertainty, they say this, and it's true, you should have some of your money, not all of it, obviously, you should have some of your money in precious metals, because with the government inflating the currency and with uncertainty in the future of the stock market, it's good to have something that's never going to be worth zero, the common currency that has always been the bedrock for exchange over the course of human history. Right now, the place you want to go to is Birch Gold Group. You can give them a call at 800-496-6663. They're the folks that I trust. They do have a long-standing track record of continued success. They do have an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau, which means something because it's hard to get a good rating from the Better Business Bureau for some of these gold groups. Some of them tend to be kind of scammy. That's not Birch Gold. They have countless five-star reviews. Again, that A-plus from the Better Business Bureau. If you contact them right now, they'll send you a free information kit on physical precious metals. I think that's great. You should research before you invest on anything, particularly gold, so make sure that you check out all their information. It's a 16-page kit, and it tells you how gold and silver protect your savings and how you can legally move your IRA or 401k out of stocks and bonds and into precious metals, which, if you're worried about the future of the stock market, is not a bad idea. To get that no-cost, no-obligation kit, call Birch Gold right now at 800-496-6663 or go to birchgold.com/Ben. That's 800-496-6663. Or online at birchgold.com/Ben. Make sure that you type /Ben so that they know that we sent you, and that, of course, helps us continue to move the show forward because, obviously, they help sponsor the show, which means that all the useless people who otherwise would be homeless and living off your taxpayer dollars instead work for me hitting buttons. So, okay, there's so much to talk about today. We'll begin with the big news of the day. The big news of the day is that Anthony Weiner is now he is now the victim of separation from Huma Abedin. And the media are treating Huma as though she is the world's greatest victim. This is because Anthony Weiner, he sent pictures to some 40-year-old buxom brunette who is sending him pictures. She basically, it looks like she catfished him. Apparently, she's some anonymous Trump supporter, and she sent this information to the New York Post. And so there are pictures that look like this of Anthony Weiner. We have blurred out his aforementioned name, and that next to him is his kid, his 4-year-old kid, who's sleeping there. And Anthony is lonely, so Anthony is tweeting out pictures of his junk to this 4-year-old brunette. And he's very obviously proud of his physique. I don't know why he thinks this is working for him, since he's now tried this several times in a row, and it's never worked out well. But he was texting his junk to people, and so that's what ends up happening. Huma Abedin, she immediately released a statement saying, "We're done here. I'm not with you anymore." And people are celebrating her. Oh, what a strong, wonderful woman for finally getting rid of him. Okay, I want to make a couple of points about this. Number one, all the people who are saying she's a strong, wonderful woman for dumping Anthony Weiner are the same people who say that Hillary Clinton is a paragon of strength for sticking for with Bill Clinton, right? I mean, all the same people. And it was about time she threw that dog out. Okay, what Anthony Weiner did, just to point this out, what he actually did is have a funny name and text his junk at people. That's a lot less bad than Elliot Spitzer actually hiring prostitutes. It's a lot less bad than Bill Clinton actually raping people. But they still worship at the altar of Bill Clinton. He's a laughingstock because of his last name and because he's like an incompetent high school boy who thinks that if he texts pics of his junk at girls that they're interested. Note to dudes, no girl in the world is interested in pictures of your junk. Okay, girls, it turns out, are not guys. They're not interested in pictures of guys' junk. If you think if that's your number one go-to mating move, you're going to end up sad and alone like Anthony Weiner. So that's point number one. Point number two, the media have decided to make Huma the victim in all of this. Okay, to a certain extent, she's a victim. She's a victim like Hillary was a victim of philandering in 1998. This is the third time this has happened. Okay, it's not like she didn't know that Anthony Weiner has this problem. Everybody in the United States knew that Anthony Weiner had this problem. And it's not like she then built her life to help out Anthony Weiner to help overcome this problem. She's been on the campaign trail with Hillary Clinton and working with Hillary Clinton for the last few years, to much rumored effect. So everybody who's treating her like she's some sort of paragon of feminism and victimhood here, no, this is a business marriage to begin with. I mean, let's just put it this way, just final note on this. Any wedding officiated by Bill Clinton is not going to go well. Their wedding was legitimately officiated by a guy who's an alleged rapist. Okay, that's a pretty good indicator that the marriage is not going to go well from the beginning. There are some other elements of the marriage that were kind of suspicious from the beginning. I mean, there's a woman who's a very observant Muslim, apparently, and she married a Jewish guy, which is really rare. But in any case, the only person I'm really sad for here is the kid. I'm not really that sad for her. She knew what was going on. I'm not sad for him because he's a scuzzbag. I'm sad for the kid. And they pop out this 4-year-old kid, and now this kid has a divorced family, and that really is sad. That's really sad. So that's the latest on the Weiner news. What's amazing, by the way, the media are treating this as though the real story here is Donald Trump's reaction to it. Donald Trump said to the New York Times that this is a security risk because he could be blackmailed and Huma is working for Hillary, one of the most powerful women in America. And the media went nuts over this. I don't see why Trump is wrong on that. I don't. I really don't see why Trump is wrong. I mean, I guess that now Hillary is blackmail-proof since no one cares that she leads her own sexual lifestyle, presumably, and Bill is slipping everything in a 300-mile radius, including tree stumps. Nobody cares about that anymore. So she's blackmail-proof, but Huma isn't, so I don't see why Trump's point is that bad. Would it be possible in some world that Huma Abedin would be blackmailed over her husband's peccadillos? Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. We used to care about this sort of thing in America. Not anymore. Okay, so that's all I have to say on Weinergate 2016, so we'll just cut off that Weiner. Okay, next we move on to what I think is really the big story of the weekend and really the big story of the last couple of years. And that is the resurgence of racial animus from the left. We talked a lot about the alt-right last week, the kind of Trumpian alt-right or the Trump-friendly alt-right and what they stand for, and this sort of white supremacist racial consolidation. And what I said is that it's a reaction, and it is. It's a reaction. It's a reaction to the racial solidarity of the left and the racism of the left. And the reason that is so obvious is we'll start with Colin Kaepernick. I mentioned him at the top of the show. Here's Colin Kaepernick, that's 49ers quarterback, who really stinks, and he's sitting on the bench here. And he's sitting on the bench during the National Anthem. Everybody else is standing. This, of course, makes big news. And then Colin Kaepernick explains himself in typical articulate style.
I mean, ultimately, it's to bring awareness and make people, realize what's really going on in this country. There are a lot of things that are going on that are unjust, people aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change. That's something that, this country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all. and it's not happening for all right now.
Is this something that's evolved as a philosophy in your mind, and how has this kind of progressed that you make a stand like this?
It's something that I've seen, I've felt, wasn't quite sure how to deal with originally, and it is something that's evolved. It's something as I've gained more knowledge about, what's gone on in this country in the past, what's going on currently. These aren't new situations. This isn't new ground. It's things that have gone on in this country for years and years and have never been addressed, and they need to be.
Okay, what a hero, what a hero. And the media are treating him like a hero. He's just a hero, an unbelievable hero. ABC News has a column today by Ian O'Connor. This is from ESPN. And this ESPN, as I've said before many times, and as you know, folks, I'm always right, ESPN is just MSNBC with footballs. And ESPN is praising him. Colin Kaepernick stood tall while sitting down, which is not an easy thing to do. In fact, what he did in benching himself for the national anthem on Friday night was the hardest thing he could possibly do. The easy thing, that would be standing silently with his teammates on the San Francisco 49ers sideline, cutting against the grain of his conscience. Nobody would have known the difference, but he planted himself among the Gatorade buckets, understanding that in an age of 24/7 surveillance, he would be outed soon enough. He didn't strike the kind of dramatic pose made by Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the 1968 Summer Games in Mexico City, and that was okay. He made his statement loudly and clearly, and he said, I'm not going to stand up and show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. Right, black people and people of color, like Colin Kaepernick, who earns on average $19 million a year for being one of the crappier quarterbacks in the NFL. Again, that wouldn't be the end of the issue. I mean, there are plenty of people who have made lots of money. There are plenty of black people who were making lots of money in 1950 when Jim Crow was still a thing, right? Sammy Davis was making a lot of money in 1960 when Jim Crow was still a thing. But right now, Jim Crow is not a thing. And so now he's promulgating lies for the lapdog media. And the media are just lapping it up. They love this stuff. They love it. And there's somebody I thought who wrote an interesting column who said, if you're booing him, you should really be booing Muhammad Ali, because Muhammad Ali did the same kind of stuff. If you recall, Muhammad Ali did take booze at the time, and he rightly took booze at the time because he said some pretty evil and egregious things. I know we've made a hero out of Muhammad Ali now because he became kind of this American spokesman later in his life, but early in his life, he was saying some pretty vile things about the United States and about the war in Vietnam. But at least back when he was doing it, there was actual serious racial discrimination happening on a systemic level across the country. That simply is not true. It was bad when he said it even then. It's simply not true with Colin Kaepernick now, right? I mean, this is all nonsense. The idea that police are out there just murdering black people, that's all they care about. They're out there killing black people and targeting black people. The criminal justice system is full of racism. All of this is a lie, and we've discussed this about 1,000 times on the program, so no need to go through all the statistics again. I have full videos on this talking about all of these statistical anomalies that the left likes to cite and explaining where they come from. But Kaepernick, first of all, there's something cynical to this. Kaepernick is 5 seconds away from being cut by the San Francisco 49ers for sucking at his job. So he wanted to make this headline, and that way, if he gets cut, he can turn around and say, the real reason they cut me was not because I'm a really crappy football player. The real reason that they cut me is because I am such a standard bearer for Black Lives Matter. Okay, that's worth noting. But here's the thing about Kaepernick. Kaepernick represents the mainstream left. Him not standing up for the national anthem is actually what the mainstream left now believes. Isaiah Thomas, who was the GM of the New York Knicks, one of the worst GMs in NBA history, he said sort of the same thing over the weekend. He said that white silence is violence. This is his line.
I look at white silence in these issues as violence. White silence is the equivalent to violence in these issues.
First of all, silence is not violence. If silence were violence, then right now I'd be punching someone. Okay, but silence is not violence, obviously. But again, look at the people surrounding him, right? Max Kellerman is the guy who's sitting directly to Isaiah Thomas's left, the execrable Max Kellerman, the worst radio talk show host in America. And he's sitting there just nodding along. This is mainstream left thought. And athletes get celebrated for this, and they get ripped if they don't do this, right? If you sit there and you say something like, I don't think America's a very racist place. I think America's a pretty great place. Then you get ripped as a sellout. You get ripped as an Uncle Tom. If you do what Kaepernick did, you get praised by the media, sports and political both. Whoa, what a courageous guy. What a courageous guy. Well, funny, it's only courageous when the guy is earning $19 million a year for throwing a football. It's amazing. Again, if you have the same guy making the same amount of money saying the reverse, which is actually true, that America is the least racist country in the history of the world, and that our cops are not out shooting black people, but are largely protecting black people. That's why they're policing the inner city. then presumably you would be called a sellout and an Uncle Tom. Michael Eric Dyson, who's a racialist himself, I think he teaches at Georgetown, he says that black athletes should all do what Colin Kaepernick is doing.
Athletes must have enough courage to speak up. You got enough dough, you got enough social currency. Use your mouth to stand up for the very people who made it possible for you to become who you are.
The very people who made it possible for you to become who you are. So number one, the people who made it possible for Colin Kaepernick to become who he is are his white parents who adopted him and raised him. And the people who made it possible for him to become who he is are the people who let him into a college where he could play ball, despite the fact that he probably didn't have stellar academic qualifications. The people who made it possible for him to do what he's doing are a lot of the people who are going to these football games and paying his salary, who are largely white fans. The people who make it possible for him to be who he is are all the cops who are defending those games from terrorist attacks and criminals. Right? The first person that Colin Kaepernick is going to call when somebody tries to break into his house is the cops, just like every other person in the United States. But again, this is now mainstream left thought, and this is the point that I'm building up to, is that this is all part of a broader left. And people talk about the alt-right. The alt-left is the mainstream left. There is no alt-left because there's no mainstream left anymore. It's been totally hijacked by the Black Lives Matter racist movement. And you can see it, right? What Kaepernick says, the point I'm going to be making, is that what Kaepernick does here is fully in line with the Democratic National Platform. I don't know if you had a chance to watch any of the Video Music Awards last night, but we'll talk about that in just a second. This is why you need to subscribe, so that you can actually see it, because the imagery does matter. DailyWire.com to subscribe. We've run out of time on Facebook Live as well as YouTube. DailyWire.com to become a subscriber. That's $8 a month, and you get to see me and my beautiful face. You get to see all the video clips. You get to see Beyonce half-clad, which is not every day, but it is today because she did that again. And there's also, if you want to join the mailbag, that's the way to join the mailbag. You go to dailywire.com and subscribe, or later, if you just want to listen to the show, iTunes, SoundCloud. We are the #1 conservative podcast in America by leaps and bounds, and we are so happy that you've made that possible for us.